Okay, in this last video, we're just going to have a look at some of the links between different types of efficiency, which we've kind of already started, and then looking at ways that the government can intervene and the private sector to try and promote the different types of efficiency. This will be the last video. So the relationship between different types of efficiency, again, we've sort of looked at this quite a lot, but we're looking at technical and allocative. The positives for technical, for allocative: low prices, higher incomes because we're using more of our resources, less unemployment and underutilization, which improves living standards, and potentially less waste, because technical efficiency implies we're not wasting resources. The negatives is there's no guarantee we're producing goods and services in society's best interest. We may be producing undesirable goods and services or products that people don't want. Dynamic and allocative, the positives: the faster we shift resources into certain areas, the more dynamically efficient we are, the quicker we can meet society's wants and needs. The more mobile our land, labour and capital, the more we can maximise utility. Good to provide examples, so if there's more demand for chocolate or avocados or mangoes or whatever, the faster we can shift resources into that area, the faster we can meet society's wants and needs. The mining boom is another good example. For example, if China wants more of our commodities, the far more dynamically efficient we are, the quicker we can maximise incomes. You could use small cars, etc., etc. Technical and intertemporal, the positives and negatives here. The positives are that there's no waste, which is good for intertemporal efficiency. So if we're being technically efficient, we're not wasting resources. So we're not wasting paper, for example, because we're trying to minimise costs and maximise productivity. It can often involve using more efficient production techniques, which can be good for the environment, can be associated with using renewable energy. On the flip side, being intertemporally efficient is good for technical efficiency because often by preserving the environment, that can help us to make us more productive in the future. So, for example, it can keep land fertile, and if we're reducing incidents of natural disasters, for example, that can make us more productive in the long term because we have less disruptions. So that's a benefit for intertemporal, for technical. On the flip side, there can be a contrasting or conflicting relationship between the two. So being more technically efficient associated with increased productivity may involve depleting our resources faster. So it may involve getting coal out of the ground faster or cutting down trees faster, which can have negative impacts for intertemporal efficiency. On the flip side, policies to improve intertemporal efficiency, like, for example, a carbon tax, can increase firms' costs of production. It may mean them less productive in theory, and that can be bad for technical efficiency. So there can be a negative relationship to being technically efficient if we're using more of our resources, deforestation, coal, etc. It can be negative for intertemporal efficiency if that comes about from a higher cost of production for firms. Allocative and intertemporal, basically, look, we have to preserve the environment to achieve allocative efficiency as well, because if we're not maximising living standards in the future, then technically we're not achieving allocative efficiency. So measures to reduce climate change, however, can have some negative impact on living standards in the short term if they increase firms' cost of production, but they should help achieve both in the long term. You're probably not going to get asked the relationship between these two. Trade-offs, technical and intertemporal, we talked about. So, for example, increased output per unit of input can come about through increased mineral extractions, which may hurt intertemporal efficiency. Giving subsidies firms to invest may create new technology, which might be good for productivity, but may hurt the environment. And measures to improve intertemporal efficiency can increase firms' costs of production. I won't go into that one now in detail. So, examples of specific questions. How can technical efficiency help allocative efficiency? We've kind of done that. So low prices, low prices, less idle resources, increased GDP per capita. How can intertemporal achieve allocative? So, look, I'm not going to go into these now, actually. I'll go talk about them in class. The relationship between intertemporal and allocative efficiency. So intertemporal efficiency is achieved when an ideal balance is met between resources to satisfy the needs and wants of today while conserving resources for the future. Resources often need to be conserved to ensure sufficient availability of resources for future generations, and therefore by doing that we can maximise the well-being of society. Answer 2, an economy requires a certain amount of consumption to continue to function and grow, but we also need investment into the future. So part of allocative efficiency is allocating resources between consumption and investment, so ensuring that we're saving resources for the future. An example of that would be global warming. There's been increased consumer demand for environmentally friendly products like renewable energy sources. That desire is to achieve intertemporal efficiency, which will therefore ensure that we're maximising living standards for the future, maximising allocative efficiency. Government policies to achieve each of the different types of efficiency. So again, this is probably more specific and really important from this video. You need to think about what the government can do that's specific to each different type of efficiency. So for allocative efficiency, you're mainly focusing on things that will maximise the living standards of society. Something like an excise tax on cigarettes to reduce cigarette consumption, or taxes on alcohol. Plain packaging laws are good for allocative efficiency because it reduces smoking. Subsidising desirable goods, so like vaccinations, schooling, they're all examples of policies the government can implement to try and improve allocative efficiency. Hurting allocative efficiency, potentially anything that encourages to produce in inefficient areas, so like tariffs on foreign products could make us less allocatively efficient because we continue to produce products that we're not necessarily productive at producing, and things that hurt the environment may hurt allocative efficiency as well. Technical efficiency, anything that encourages firms to be more productive you're looking at there. So removing unfair dismissal laws, which is about making it easy to sack people, that might make us more technically efficient because people are worried about losing their jobs. It also makes it easier to sack unproductive workers, so that means you can be more productive as well because you're getting rid of those that aren't very good. Deregulating the labour market's about paying people based on performance, so putting people on contracts at an individual workplace level to make them more productive because they're getting paid based on their performance, so tying in productivity and pay. Anything that's going to encourage training and investment, so providing funds for that. Lower tariffs on imports increase competition, which might make us more productive as well. Things that hurt technical efficiency, protecting industries, potentially a high minimum wage because it increases firms' costs of production. Dynamic efficiency, moving unfair dismissal laws, that's dynamically efficient because it allows firms to shift resources to where they're wanted, so they can sack workers in areas where they don't need workers anymore, and that therefore resources can be redeployed to areas where society is demanding products. Cutting tariffs and subsidies, again, cutting tariffs means that firms have to restructure and shift resources to areas of comparative advantage, which makes us more dynamically efficient because there's more competition, so we have to be responsive to consumers' needs. Hurting dynamic efficiency, protecting inefficient industries can make them less responsive to consumers' needs, is one example. Helping intertemporal efficiency, anything that's good for the environment. So a carbon tax, subsidies for investment in renewable energy, and then these last two are about encouraging savings. So compulsory superannuation is related to intertemporal efficiency because it forces people to save for retirement. Tax concessions for savings, so if you have more money in the bank, you don't have to pay as much tax, is another example. Things that might hurt, removing the carbon tax, spending excessive amounts of money, the government, and therefore not having money for the future, so going into a lot of debt. Ways to improve technical efficiency specifically, so the government, we've talked about these, but enterprise bargaining agreements, so paying people based on performance, removing unfair dismissal, increasing competition through lower tariffs, any training and education makes us more productive, and maybe changing the tax system to encourage productivity as well, which we'll talk about later in the year. From a workplace level, bonuses, incentives, training and education, good workplace culture, that all encourages productivity, which is technically efficient. How can the government promote technical efficiency? So the government may promote technical efficiency by enterprise bargaining agreements, so allowing wages to be tied to productivity, subsidising capital investment so we can get more technology, which makes us more productive. These can all boost output per unit of input and boost technical efficiency. Other things, commissions, are another example to try and encourage productivity. Ways to improve dynamic efficiency. So from the government's perspective, lower tariffs on imports, which again encourages competition. So we have to shift resources to areas of comparative advantage. Reducing subsidies, so we stop producing in inefficient industries because we're not getting funding or support anymore. Removing unfair dismissal laws so firms can easily sack and redeploy people is another example. From a business perspective, multi-skilling their employees so they're more adaptive to changes in consumers' preferences is a great example. Installing flexible capital equipment that can be reallocated to different areas of production. Hiring workers on a casual basis can make firms more dynamically efficient because it allows them to sort of sack people when they don't need them, but also to increase output when required as well. Ways to improve intertemporal efficiency, subsidies for solar panels, grants for clean energy, compulsory superannuation, carbon taxes, tax concessions for savings, which we talked about. How can the government both help and hurt dynamic efficiency? We've talked about most of these, but removing unfair dismissal laws can help because it allows firms to quickly redeploy labour. Lower tariffs encourages firms to shift resources to comparative advantage. Moving the minimum wage, basically that means that wages will better reflect sort of demand and supply for labour as opposed to just sort of protecting workers, and promoting education, so more funding for education so we can multi-skill employees. Policies that hurt, high tariffs and subsidies because they encourage inefficient production, high unfair dismissal laws because then it's harder to sack people, so you might be stuck with people for a long period of time. High minimum wages could lead to high unemployment as well, which we'll talk about more in class. That's it. Thank you.